The nose, eyes, tongue, and ears are organs for special senses. What are special senses, if I may ask? Special senses are those senses with highly localized receptors that provide specific information about the environment. There are 5 special senses, and they include hearing and balancing, taste, smell, and vision. In this video, we're going to be focusing only on hearing and balancing. We will talk about the organ for hearing and balancing, which is what? Let's see how good you are. The organ for hearing and balancing is ear. Correct. You deserve an accolade. We will also talk about the mechanism of hearing. Also, we will talk about the neuronal pathway for hearing. We will also discuss concisely on the vestibular apparatus and balancing. We will talk briefly on the neuronal pathway for balance. You know, there is no way we can talk about all these without the applied physiology, which is hearing defects. We will conclude with a routine test for hearing. So sit tight and enjoy the ride. The right stimulus that is required for hearing, that is audition, is the vibration in the conducting medium. Normally the conducting medium is air, but we can also hear underwater. Underwater, we hear sound conducted through our skull. Air, being a conducting medium, is said to vibrate by simply the vibration of the source of the sound. For us to hear, it is important to get the information about the sound to the auditory cortex. This requires a series of events which includes sound reception, sound amplification, and conversion of sound into neural impulse, which the brain will be able to make use of and also give the right interpretation to it. The organ of hearing and balancing, which is known as the ear, is divided into 3 parts, and they include the external ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. The external and the middle ear are specifically involved in the hearing only, whereas the inner ear functions in both hearing and maintaining body balance. Let's talk about the external and middle ear so that we can have a clearer understanding of the various functions of different parts, okay? The pinna is that flap that is located on the side of your head. It can also be called the auricle. The pinna consists mainly elastic cartilage that is covered by the skin. The shape of the pinna helps sound wave tone captured and channeled towards the auditory meatus. It amplifies the sound wave a little bit. The pinna does another important function, which is to select sound and makes it easier to focus on a particular sound. For instance, during conversation, it is the pinna that enables you to focus on that conversation, excluding external noise on the course of the conversation. The external auditory meatus is covered with hairs and ceruminous gland, which produces cerumen. This cerumen is a modified sebum, which is also known as the earwax. Let's not forget that the external auditory meatus is located within the external ear. The hairs and the cerumen play an important role, which is helping to prevent foreign objects from reaching the delicate eardrum. The very first part of the middle ear is the tympanic membrane, which is commonly called the eardrum. The tympanic membrane is a very thin membrane stretched across the end of the auditory canal. Let's talk a little bit of the anatomical structure of the tympanic membrane. The tympanic membrane consists of a low, simple cuboidal epithelium on the inner surface and a thin stratified squamous epithelium on the outer surface, with a layer of connective tissue between the inner surface and the outer surface. Sound waves reaching it through the external auditory meatus causes it to vibrate. The tympanic membrane is extremely sensitive. A special muscle tightens the eardrum to make it tighter or loosen it to adjust the sensitivity to changing sound levels. This special muscle is known as tensor tympani. Unequal pressure between the middle ear and the outside environment can distort the eardrum, and this will dampen its vibration, making it really difficult to hear properly. Due to this distortion of the eardrum, when an individual changes altitude, the sound will become reduced and the eardrum might end up becoming very painful. This painful experience can be reduced by simply opening the auditory tube in order to allow air so as to balance the air pressure. The simple ways of opening the auditory tubes include swallowing, chewing, yawning, and holding the nose and mouth shut while gently trying to force air out of the lungs. The second part of the middle ear contains 3 auditory ossicles. These ossicles are actually tiny bones, and they include the malleus. The malleus is also called the hammer, the incus, which we can also call the anvil, and the last, which is the stapes, which we can also call the stirrups. The function of these tiny bones is to transmit sound vibration in a lever fashion from the tympanic membrane to the cochlea. Also, these ear ossicles provide additional amplification of the sound by concentrating the energy collected from the tympanic membrane onto the base of the stapes. This base of the stapes in turn rests on the oval window, which is a base of the cochlea. Having understood the external ear a little bit, let's talk about the inner ear and the mechanisms that leads to hearing. The tunnels and chambers inside the temporal bone are called the bony labyrinths. You know where the temporal bone is located, right? It is important to check our video on the bones of the skull to fully see and understand better, okay? This bony labyrinth is divided into 3 regions. They include the cochlea, the vestibule, and the semicircular canals. The vestibule and the cochlea contain the utricle and the circles, okay? The vestibule and the semicircular canals are basically concerned with the maintaining a balanced posture, whereas the cochlea is solely involved in hearing. Let's talk about the cochlea a little bit. The cochlea is where sound analyzing structures are located. It has a shape of a snail and it is located in the temporal bone. The cochlea is 35 mm in length in human and it is coiled about 2.5 times. The membranous labyrinth of the cochlea is divided into 3 parts, namely the scala vestibuli, the scala media, and the scala tympani. These 3 parts are filled with fluids. Like we stated before now, the stapes rest on the oval window. The oval window is simply a thin flexible membrane on the face of the scala vestibuli. The scala vestibuli is the point of entry of sound energy into the cochlea, and it connects the tympanic canal at the very end of the cochlea through an opening known as the helicotrema. The scala vestibuli and the scala tympani are filled with perilymph. There are actually spaces between the walls of the bony and membranous labyrinth. The wall of the membranous labyrinth that bounds the scala vestibuli is called the resinous membrane. But if you don't call it the resinous membrane, you can also call it the vestibular membrane. The wall of the membranous labyrinth bounding the scala tympani is called the basilar membrane. The scala media is filled with endolymph. This endolymph is a fluid similar to the one that is found in cells, and it has a high potassium concentration. The basilar membrane is of great physiologic interest in relationship to the mechanism of hearing compared to resinous membrane. You might ask, why is it that the basilar membrane is considered to be of greater physiological importance than resinous membrane? Well, the reason is simple. It is because the basilar membrane is the main mechanical element of the inner ear. It possesses graded masses and stiffness properties over its length. Its vibration pattern has the effect of separating incoming sound into its component frequencies that activate different cochlear regions. The cells inside the cochlear duct are highly modified to form a structure called the organ of Corti. This organ of Corti contains specialized sensory cells called the hair cell. The hair cells are arranged in 4 long rows and their strips are embedded in a gelatinous shelf called the tectoral membrane. The hair cells are the receptors of auditory stimulation. Let's talk briefly on the mechanism of hearing, okay? The vibration of the vestibular membrane and the cochlear fluid bends the hair cells. When this happens, potassium and calcium channels open and the depolarization of the hair cells membrane occurs. This sets up impulses in the auditory neuron connected to the hair cells. When the hair cells move back in the opposite direction, it relaxes and the potassium channels close. The human cochlea has 2 sets of hair cells, a single row of 3,500 inner hair cells and 3 rows of about 12,000 outer hair cells. What are the functions of these inner hair cells and outer hair cells, you may ask? Well, the inner hair cells receive 90 to 95% of the auditory neuron, and they provide the majority of the information about auditory stimulation. The outer hair cells amplify the signal produced by the weak sound and provide adjustable frequency selectively. Alright, having talked about these, let's go straight and talk about the neuronal pathway for hearing. But before we do that, I would like us to take a glass of water to watch this information we've taken so far into our brain for permanent storage. Alright, neurons from the cochlea make up part of the auditory nerve, which is the vestibulocochlear nerve. It is the 8th cranial nerve. Do not worry, we will make a video on the 12 cranial nerves, where we will discuss the cause of the nerve and also their various functions. The vestibulocochlear nerve enters the brain on each side of the brainstem. The second neuron crosses to the other side of the medulla and synapses or joins with a third neuron which runs into the inferior colliculus, that is the midbrain, and synapses with the fourth neuron which then runs to the medial geniculate body of the thalamus. A fifth neuron runs from the medial geniculate body to the auditory cortex, that is the superior portion of the temporal lobe, the Brodmann area 41. The auditory cortex is concerned with the recognition of the nerve impulse as sound, analyzing the properties of the sound and also localization of sound. Let's quickly discuss the steps involved in hearing. Firstly, the auricle, which we also call the pineal, will collect the sound waves from the external environment. These sound waves, which are then conducted through the external auditory meatus to the tympanic membrane, causing the tympanic membrane to vibrate. The vibrating tympanic membrane, on the other hand, will cause the ear ossicles, which are the malleus, the incus, and the stapes, to also vibrate. The vibration of the stapes produces the vibration of the perileaf of the scalar vestibule. The vibration of the perileaf produces simultaneous vibration of the vestibular membrane and the endoleaf in the cochlear duct. The vibration of the endoleaf causes the basilar membrane to vibrate. As the basilar membrane vibrates, the hair cell attached to the membrane moves relative to the tentorial membrane, which remains stationary. The hair cell microvilli embedded in the tentorial membrane becomes bent. Bending of the microvilli causes the depolarization of the hair cells. The hair cells induce action potential into the cochlear neuron. The action potential generated in the cochlear neuron are then conducted to the central nervous system. Finally, the action potential conducted to the central nervous system are translated in the cerebral cortex and are perceived as sound. So guys, on our next video, we'll talk about the vestibular apparatus and balancing. We will also talk about the neuronal pathway for balancing and talk concisely on the hearing defect and as well as a written test. Please show me some love by clicking on the subscription button. Tap on the like button for YouTube algorithm. Until then, remain peaceful and always do the right thing. God bless you. God got you. Peace.